And so, like I said, this particular course focuses on pre-service teachers or current teachers who are pursuing the ESOL endorsement. And so with that being said, in this assignment, we help students learn how to identify the language demands of textbooks that they will be using with their students. So this is not necessarily for ELD content, it's for actual subject area, content areas. And they learn how to analyze the language demands in their text. And then they learn how to teach students not only about high-level vocabulary, but about meta language, and just teach about language itself. And then to create lesson plans that offer access to their content area by analyzing that language. So first, it's set up for the teacher themselves to analyze the text they're presenting to their students. And then it's also trying to set up, the way we're refining it and tuning it up is so that our students are also processing that. So your first grade students or your adult students, that they would come on board as well and also learn how to analyze language in text so that they can create comprehensible input out of the content area. My colleague was going to talk a little bit about SFL and give an overview of our steps in the textbook analysis, but I will move on. Abigail, any word? I know he just texted me and said he has no clue how to find.
Could you drop his number or in the chat, and I could text him, give the tech host, and maybe I could
that would be so
him.
Fantastic. Yes, let me do that quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Participants, I appreciate your patience here.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, let's make sure I did that correctly. Okay, I appreciate your support there.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
Okay, so systemic functional linguistics. Again, this is my colleague's background, but I will give a little bit of info about it just for those of you who aren't familiar, but it sounds like Nathan might be. It's a school of linguistics originally developed by the British linguist, Michael Halliday, and its basic concern is to develop analytical categories for language, talk about the relationship between language and social structure, but obviously also just looking at how language functions. Why are we using language for the functions of academics, social structures, etc. So in this case, we are going to talk a little bit about how that fits in with the context of the course that I explained. As you can see, the course goals do focus on developing and understanding the nature of language and its components. So that's its fit there. Well, you can see that there's a lot of tie-ins with the systemic functional linguistics through our goals, but obviously we're also analyzing phonology, morphology, syntax, and just those features of English. So not only can our pre-service and in-service teachers understand how those work in second language acquisition, but also so that our own students that we're teaching, first grade and adult learners, can also learn to analyze those components of language for themselves and their own understanding of English, and then making those cross-linguistic connections. So with that being said, I'll get in here. So I'd like to open for you the former version of our assignment that looks like this. So it's basically letting students know, based on your study of linguistics and its application to learning and teaching, you will conduct an analysis of a textbook following a framework that's described in an article we're currently using by Reagan. They will analyze and highlight components of morphology, syntax, and why it's important to teach these to ELs in their classrooms. So they follow these steps. They choose a textbook, and then they follow the chart provided in the Reagan article to analyze that textbook, looking at main ideas and learning objectives, examine the organization of the structure of the text, deciding what language might be difficult for emergent bilinguals. And so that's what the current assignment looks like. They look at academic language, and we give them a nice little scoring guide to use for that. So that is the former version. The newer version that we're working on and tuning up looks at steps for the instructor or teacher. Again, when we take a look at this textbook, we note the learning objective, we identify content and discipline specific vocabulary. We look at the function of the language. Are we sequencing? Are we describing, comparing, contrasting? We're looking at the language modalities, the language mode, educational linguistics, meta-language, text structure, etc. Then steps for students, so that we want the students to know what is the purpose of them reading this text. We want them to start taking a look at and examining text structure, looking at headings and subheadings, captions, taking a look at vocabulary they don't know, and then investigating meta-language after that has already been taught. The other area that would be added with the meta-language underneath is cross-linguistic strategies as well after you've taught that to students. So let me just take a quick pause there and hear any questions or comments about the former version and the new version, or the purpose of this text analysis.
What were some of the feedback you got from teaching the former version that led you to those changes?
Great. So some of the feedback we received from the former version was just that it didn't dive deep enough with what we know about language now and language learning, that it was a little more on the surface, and we wanted to do a deep dive into more about just teachers feeling equipped and prepared to teach language. And in order to do that, in order to dissect the text, it takes some skill and practice. So we read some research about teachers just basically saying they don't feel equipped to really decompose and decompress, deconstruct the textbook in all of the areas that their students really needed support. So with that being said, it was also then feedback hearing teachers say, well, we're using this, but we're not translating that to our students. So we're analyzing the text, we're teaching the vocabulary necessary, the language functions, etc., but we're not necessarily teaching our students how to look and analyze and take apart the textbook, so that they transfer those skills to themselves. And so it's not always just on the teacher. So I'd like to welcome my colleague, Dr. Schultze. He made it. Dr. Schultze, we have two participants here, Priscilla teaching first grade and Nathan teaching adults. And so at this point, we're just, I described a little bit about the former and the new version. We haven't looked at the language detective yet, but Nathan was asking, and I just finished answering what led us to creating the new version. So does that answer your question there?
Yes, thank you. One other very left field thought I had was, have you looked into having students who are bilingual read an English text and a translation of it in parallel? Because I know that in Taiwan, sometimes college students do that. And do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Dr. Schultze, do you want to answer that, Josh, or do you want me to? I don't think we have audio. Yes.
You're muted. There you go.
Okay, you can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I was having some trouble with the, not only just getting here, but with the sound. It was strange, but now you're here. Yeah, I have worked with students on comparing texts that are written in English and Spanish, and for critical discourse analysis reasons, basically taking a look and see how different issues, particularly in history and civics, are presented. Yeah, it's there's a lot of opportunity for that. What grade are you working with, Nathan? What secondary?
I'm teaching adults.
Adults. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree. We definitely teach our own students at the university level to use bilingual texts or translations when possible, to compare the language in both for cross-linguistic strategies, and also we just recognize and understand that that's not always possible. And sometimes our students can't get their hands on a translated text. So this gives them a second set of tools. We always encourage supporting with home language, but when we can't, then we definitely offer these strategies. But again, these strategies can also be used in the translated home language text as well. And then again, it provides that opportunity for the cross-linguistic. So Josh, we looked again at former and new versions, and we haven't yet looked at Language Detective.
Okay.
And do you want to?
Can you click on that? Or?
I would need to open that, wouldn't I? Yes.
Okay, so this represents, this is like the second stage of this process of changing this particular assignment. And this particular tool I've been working on for about 4 or 5 years. I've worked with, I'm using systemic functional linguistics to inform the language analysis. So I've tried to change it, make it a little bit more specific in the things that they're looking for in terms of pinpointing how the language is used in the textbook they're looking at, looking particularly at field, tenor, and mode. And so there are a couple of guiding questions. Yeah, you can go down to that here. So I missed the part where Jessica introduced systemic functional linguistics. How did that go? Any questions about that? How did it go? Were there any? How much was covered? I missed that part.
It was brief, and we just talked about how we were using that to inform basically what you just said, but we didn't go deeply into each component. So this would be
okay. That's good. So, there are 3 parts of SFL. When you're looking at register, we're looking at in every language interaction, there's the field. It's, how you're representing social reality, what's going on, what the topic is, what the subject matter is. And then there are some questions. We could just leave that there.
okay.
That will help us guide looking specifically at the field. The field is always, the main part of the field of what's going on is the action, right? So we want students to, or anyone analyzing a text to look and see how the actions are being presented. So are they showing what's happening internally, externally? Are they in passive form and active form? All of those things are important because, for example, in a passive form, if they use the passive form in a science text, we can teach students that that's how actions are typically presented, but we want to also teach them why. Why is that? Because in science, you're de-emphasizing agency and you're putting the emphasis on the phenomena, not the person doing the action. Where in a narrative, for example, it's the opposite. So giving them specific questions to look at to identify the processes, whether they're mental, material, behavioral. SFL is like traditional grammar, but so much more fine and detailed, and you don't have to do it that detailed when you're doing this kind of analysis. You just do as much as you need to be able to get a really strong idea of how the language is being used, so you can present that to students. So you have the field, how things are going and being presented. So if we move further down, there are some guiding questions that will support the learner. The person doing the analysis. Then we look at tenor. So what's the relationship? What specific parts about language are contributing to this tenor? And tenor is all about basically the familiarity and the power relations that are going on between folks using language. Okay. I work primarily with I was an elementary school teacher, and I think a lot in elementary terms, but if you think about how in certain textbooks that are used, you have large portions of the text may use, a language that really reflects an academic language expectations, but oftentimes they break that tenor. It's like breaking what do they call it on TV, like the fourth wall, or like when you're looking at the audience. They'll do things to connect with folks. with students, and they'll maybe ask them a direct question. Oh, have you ever thought about what photosynthesis is? Like, kids don't really think about that, but those are the kind of questions that are out there. And the reason they have that is kind of to create a dialogue, and they shift the tenor a bit. Now, for an English language learner, that can be really confusing because they don't know that they're shifting the tenor. They may find that really jarring. So if a teacher is doing this kind of analysis, they can say, okay, there's a shift in tenor, but why? How can I make that visible to my learners? And then show them how they're doing that, so that they don't, when they're using academic language in context where they're expected to do that, when they're writing or when they're doing presentations, how are they able to recognize these differences? How and when you shift tenor, to connect with an audience, perhaps. Okay, and then let's go down a little bit to the last, which is mode. And the mode has to do with how much something reflects written form, like a continuum. How much is it meant to be written, and how much is the language going to be spoken? Okay, but a good example, you have an academic informational report, that's going to be in a highly written academic mode with that kind of structure and language use. But not everything that is written is meant to solely be written. Take for example, a eulogy or a speech or something like a genre like that. That's written down, but it's meant to be spoken. So while the spoken language, it'll reflect more on the written continuum. So we want to, we need to help our students understand that, especially if English is a new language for them. So there are a lot of specific things that they can look at when they're analyzing that part of the text to see how it's working. So that's really short, but we can move on.
Perfect, because I know we are down to about 12 minutes, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So basically,
Yes,
what
we go until 12:35.
Thank you. Basically, at this point, we wanted to give you an opportunity to stop again and ask questions, and then especially about those 3 tools you just took a look at. And then we wanted to take a look at a student sample together using that language detective tool in particular, or if you're interested in using the new version form that we're drafting, you can work with us on that as well. So we just wanted to analyze together at this point. But first, again, open it up to questions or comments you might have right now. Okay, and I take it back. We're not analyzing student samples. We're going to analyze the text next, but we wanted to show you a couple of student samples of what this looked like from our end when some of our students completed this assignment. So I will scroll down a bit just so you can kind of get into the analysis part where you see they looked at a specific chapter in a book. They took a look at main ideas, vocabulary, and skills. Again, this is based off of the older version. Moving into looking at vocabulary. They're looking at understanding and analyzing. They take apart some of the difficult language and the type of language that it is. I see some of the columns didn't make it over when we moved this into a Google Doc. So they're looking at an example from the textbook and then looking at things that might be missing also that need to be taught when they're analyzing the language. And then they're reflecting on the different components.
So they don't have to, we should emphasize too, even though they may analyze how language is being used, depending on who their students are and their needs and where they are in the curriculum, that's when they will choose this. That's how that will inform their teaching, because they'll say, okay, this is what they need the most in terms of language instruction to make meaning from this particular text, based on whether they're beginning or advanced students. Just like any teacher does, but they actually have the language from the text right in front of them that they'll say, okay, here are their patterns. This is what I need to emphasize for our students.
So then they go on to reflect even further on what was in that chart, just like Josh said, so that they can then transfer that into what it should look like in their teaching. We have a few other student samples and we will share our link. In fact, I'll just do it right now for the whole presentation so you can access those. Sorry, let me just move this to everyone. So you can take a look at those if you want further examples. And then what we wanted to do, like I said, now is take a look at analyzing a bit ourselves. So we have a link to a 6th grade science text here that you can open. And I suppose actually we can just open it together since it's a small group.
Mhm.
And then we would look at that language detective. I did send you a link to that as well, so we can start to analyze together. But if you can find that link to our presentation, and on this slide, go to the science textbook link. And then we'll just move right into the first chapter here. Chapter 1. So we'll all start on.
Sorry to interrupt. It's still
Sorry.
saying I can't access that second link you put in there.
Okay.
Yes, they have said we have to have access, and it will send you an email.
Actually, I can just do that quickly here. I'll move it to this for now as viewers. Okay. Apologize for not having that quite ready. Okay, so back to the version of the textbook. So if we go to chapter 1, moon phases. And if we'll just, I think, give everyone just a couple minutes to look at chapter 1 and then look at the language detective for text analysis that we reviewed a minute ago, that Josh reviewed, and start thinking through those questions of field, tenor, and mode in particular. Again, that's that link to the SFL. And then when you have more time, you can also look at any text and link it back to our newer version as well of the form that we will be eventually using with students once we're done drafting. So let's just maybe we are quickly running out of time, but let's just say maybe we go into for 3 minutes, take a look at the chapter and the chart on our own and look at how we'd start analyzing that text and touch base again at 12:33.
Could you remind us again what link it is for the chapter we're looking at?
That would be, it's in the slide, but I'll pull it out and send it to you separately.
The science text?
That's it.
Yes, I'll just put it right here in the.
I think looking at these 2 pages the first 2 pages is more than enough, because even one sentence can be analyzed for field, tenor, and mode. And a lot of things, I'm just reading the first paragraph. Aren't you seeing a lot of things already that would be interesting for English language learners?
Nathan and Priscilla, do you feel like that's enough time to have skimmed a little bit of that text to have a little discussion since we're down to 4 minutes?
Yeah, I just looked at page 14 and 15.
Yeah, I'm also there. I think I went to the first page, and my instinct was first looking at the bold letters. I don't know if everybody's
Yeah.
so taking that vocabulary out before the lesson, and start asking students some of their background knowledge. Maybe they know something or heard something. And then make a definition together. That's what I would do.
Sure. What, can you go back to the text, Jessica? The
Sure. Yes.
Thanks. And is that the first page?
There's another one.
One more page.
One before, I think, yes, that
Oh,
one.
wait.
Because
Yeah,
Perfect.
there you go. So, oh, I see it. So things are bolded. So if we look at those,
yeah,
when we're looking at the field, we look at those action words or how things are, what's happening in the text. So they bolded it for us. So I see orbits, rotates, but not, look at how orbits, maybe they've done this already, but for English language learners, but they have orbits and rotates. And then those are processes, right? And so is revolution and orbit, but they're nominalized. They're made into nouns. So they're things, okay, that represent actions. That's confusing that needs to be explicitly taught to English language learners, how to use nominalized forms. What's the difference in that? But if you look at all the what you have, orbits, rotates, revolves, etc. These are all things that somebody could see. Those are all actions. So why is that important? Well, because you're talking about its position and how it appears to folks looking in the sky. That's why the author is using so many of those material processes that you can see. So that's something you would want to explicitly show you'd want to know that as a teacher to emphasize that as you're reading it together. What else?
I know we're quickly running out of time. So it looks like we have about 1 minute left. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, so hopefully that just gives you a quick snapshot. I wish we could dive a little further into a discussion about tenor and mode. And also our intention was to look at the text analysis version 2 as well, and how you would interact with that based on a text. But you have those tools available to you now, and hopefully this just piqued your interest and started the conversation so that you can use this moving forward in your work. What feedback might you have for us on these tools and the effectiveness of these tools, or what other questions or comments might you have in the 30 seconds we have left?
I really enjoyed the presentation. I'd seen stuff on Holiday, but didn't know very much about it. The thing I noticed most in this textbook was the pictures and the question at the end. And the text is kind of a commentary on the pictures. I wonder if you could come up with icons for your several factors of analysis to make it more like, oh, that's what it is, and recognize it instantly.
That's a cool idea. That is, yeah. Visuals are important. And we should say, I mean, you have to visualize, maybe not so much in this moon text, but yeah, visuals are really important meaning making tools that you can also look at the field, tenor, and mode of visuals. Jessica, before we go, I did want to share those resources with folks.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Priscilla, did you have any other questions, comments, or feedback before we move on to the next slide?
I was thinking how would you make it, since I work with little kids, how would you make it more interesting? Since they're looking at this textbook, it's talking about phasing of the moon. So with those vocabulary words, how would you make it interesting and for little kids, since it's everything is new? I know they would be already excited about, oh, the moon, and I've seen the moon and all that. So make it more in a way that they can get more involved other than just talk about, okay, let's talk about the definition of the moon. Let's talk.
Right. Yeah, that's this
Yeah.
is for a sixth grader, but if you were
Yes.
to work with kindergarten students, you could, I mean, you'd want to make